Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Parenting in the Far North. I am your host, Ariane Arambiro. Today's guest is Sharita Napper, born and raised in Anchorage. Her Alaska roots run deep. She's a mother to 3 young girls and wants to lead by example and draws inspiration from her younger self and tries to be what that little girl needed growing up. She's big on community. She's an entrepreneur, an author, a wife, and enjoys making others smile. So please welcome to the podcast, everyone, Sharita Napper. Thank you so much and very nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. I am so excited for this interview today and just to really reach out to more people in the community. So thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, before we kind of get into all of our topics here, first, I just want you to kind of give us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about your story growing up in Alaska and with your mom as a little girl.
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska as well. My roots run deep in Anchorage. So my great grandmother was actually a founding member of the first Black church in Anchorage, Greater Friendship Baptist Church. My great uncles were the first 2 Black students enrolled in the Anchorage School District. So when I say my roots run deep, I mean very deep in Anchorage specifically. So for myself, I was born and raised. My dad, he's from San Francisco, but my dad's side of the family, they came up very early as well. And so we just, on both sides of my family, we definitely are just run through and through in Anchorage for sure. But yeah, just growing up there, I went to several different schools. We have lived a lot of different places. We have faced adversity. We've gotten through it, thrived through it. And it's just, I'm grateful to be in this space today.
Well, we're grateful to have you here on our Parenting in the Far North podcast. When I asked you about kind of what were some topics you wanted to talk about, some things that you were passionate about, one thing that came up for you mentioned was grieving. And you said how grieving has impacted you, the way that you show up for yourself and for your children. So talk a little bit about that and where that topic came from.
I don't know exactly what I want to talk about. There's so many things, but I want to stay authentic to myself. And so I am a very spiritual person. I did pray about it. And then it came to me. I'm like, I do want to talk about my journey with grieving. And specifically because it was such a turning point in my life when my brother unexpectedly passed away in November 2020. And honestly, it was just something that shook our entire family to the core. And because it's still a relevant topic in our lives, since then we have lost other family members and we have just been navigating what grief looks like in our family. And after going through all of the low lows and getting to the point where I'm experiencing the high highs, it definitely has shaped how I show up for my kids. Like you mentioned earlier, I am a mother of three girls, and I want them to definitely be able to go through the lows and the highs, depend on God and really just get through it no matter what they're facing. So I don't feel like grief is just limited to losing a person. It could be losing an experience. It could be, growing from a situation that you're no longer in. It could be any type of change. And so I really wanted to lean in on how grieving has changed and altered how I show up as a mother.
How was that for you? And I'm sorry to hear about, your brother's passing in 2020. When that did happen, I can, imagine, like you mentioned, it did rock your family. So how did that look to your girls, when they saw maybe mommy crying, and how did you kind of navigate and explain that to them, of those big emotions, so to speak?
So I consider myself to be a very happy person. I feel like I was always, trying to find the silver lining of situations, be a dependable person, always trying to be the strong friend for everyone. But when my brother passed, so at that time I was 8 months pregnant with my youngest daughter. And then I was also launching a business, My Little Napper. And it was a children's pajamas business based off of our last name. My children were the models for the business. It was a lot of fun. So I was doing the rollout for that. My launch date was November 11th, 2020. And so I was doing a lot of marketing. People were, engaging with the content. They were excited, for the launch of my business. But November 6th is when my brother passed away. And so I had to take a step back, um, feel my feelings, but also I had to make a decision. I'm like, do I still want to launch my business? I was due the following month, December 28th, with my third daughter. And we were in winter. We were, coming out of COVID. And so I just had to consider, I'm like, my emotions may be really high, especially grieving postpartum. I wanted to be very cautious. And so I decided to continue on with launching my business just so I can stay busy. I knew that if I didn't have a lot to do, I was afraid that I was going to slip into a far depression. So my brother passed November 6th. I launched my business November 11th. And then my third daughter decided to show up a month early, November
Oh,
28th.
oh
And
wow.
so all within about 3 weeks, my life had shifted in so many ways. And even at my brother's memorial, I decided to be the strong one. I I was like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not gonna. I want to be here for everyone else. I want to support everyone else. I want to, you know, show up, be the strong person. I'll be fine. And I carry that at home. Tried to be like, everything's okay. I'm okay. I'm okay. And then and I did my best to hide my emotions. I did my best to still show up as if I wasn't impacted by such a huge loss. And then after several months of trying to do that, I just broke. Obviously, when you have a brand new baby, you have a brand new business, and you are experiencing loss so closely, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, just grieving naturally. And then, the dark winter months of Alaska don't help. And then, 2020, people were still social distancing. So I didn't have as much time with my family. It was a really hard time. And I just remember not smiling a lot, not laughing a lot. Um, and that went on through 2021. I look back, and as grateful as I am, 2021 was one of the hardest years of my life because of all of those different factors. And I was still trying to pretend like I was okay. And once I gave myself space to actually feel my feelings and cry and show up, I had to really step back and say, okay, grief is not is it's I'm not the last person to experience it. My kids will experience it in some way. So I have to be honest about how I'm feeling. For a long time I was showing up and saying, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm okay.
Hmm.
Let's continue on." But realistically, I wasn't fine. And one day when my kids were looking at me and just saying, "Mommy, I think you're sad." I had to be like, okay, do I lie or do I just tell them the truth? And I decided to tell them the truth. I am sad. I lost my brother. He's in now. I wasn't expecting him. Daughter, she was my oldest daughter. She was about 5 at that time, and she was like, "Well, can we look at pictures of him?" And I'm like, okay, and so we really leaned into that, and it was so interesting for them to show up for me how I always show up for them. Like, it's okay to cry, it's okay to be sad. And I'm like, okay, it is okay to be sad, it is okay to cry, it is okay to need somebody to lean on. And so any time that I was sad, I decided to really lean into that, be honest about it. And that opened up so much for me after I decided to really lean into my sadness.
As you mentioned, so kind of going back to your childhood as a little girl, did you witness your mom crying, and what feelings did that bring up in you? Because you mentioned now you kind of want to be strong for that little girl back then that you had needed. So how has it kind of come full circle for you?
I don't remember seeing my mom crying often. And my mom, she's such a strong person. She experienced cancer. She experienced, many highs and lows. We, at one point, were living in the awake shelter for women and children that experienced abuse in the home. And so she went through a lot. And I don't remember seeing her crying because culturally, it is not expected. And a lot of Black women don't have the space to be sad, to be depressed, to be down. And the more we deny our emotions, the more it manifests in different ways. Um, my mom, like I said, went through a lot, had to overcome a lot. And I honestly decided when I lean into my grief, to my sadness, but not let it overtake me, it was a part of also showing her we can be sad, but let's express it, let's talk about it, and then let's move through it. We don't have to stop here. We don't have to unpack and live in our grief. We can continue on and carry it with us. Always make space for the fact that we lost somebody that we love, but continue to move forward.
Oh, I
So
love
I
that.
think that how I show up for my younger self is by showing all of my emotions.
And you said you have three daughters, so three girls.
Yes.
And how old are they?
Yes. So they are 9, 6, and 4.
So with your three girls, I love hearing about your, birth stories with them. What was that like with your first one compared to your third? I know you'd mentioned, postpartum depression. That's something that, I also went through. You read the books, you're like, is this baby blues? And, it doesn't really hit you till you're kind of in it. So I'm just curious to hear your story because every mom is different and, how you kind of come out on the other end of that.
Yes. So my birth stories, 3 different girls, and they just my birth story was very similar with each one of them, which was really surprising. So with each one of them, I woke up in the middle of the night, and my water broke. Like I was sleeping, I woke up, stood up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, my water broke." And it was like that with all 3 of my girls.
Wow.
So we went to the hospital. Um, and just labor naturally, no epidural, oh my gosh. And so it was all very similar, how just in the night my water broke, was in labor all day. I was in labor a little bit longer with my oldest daughter, and then by the afternoon they were all here, so it was very similar. But afterwards, so my first daughter, I didn't experience postpartum depression, but I did experience postpartum anxiety.
Mm,
I didn't know what that was. Nobody talked about it.
yeah.
I only heard of depression, and I was like, I feel fine, but I couldn't sleep. Everybody says sleep when your baby sleeps. Well, I was awake watching her to make sure, that she was
Hmm.
still breathing, and I just was overthinking everything. And I'm naturally an overthinker, so I was just overthinking even more, the germs, the just, what do I dress her in? How do I do this? How do I do that? There were so many things that I didn't realize until I was out of it, that I was, so anxious. My second daughter, I feel like that time was a lot easier because I was prepared. I
Hmm.
knew, I needed to have space. I needed to have support. I didn't put as much pressure on myself to breastfeed. That was something that I struggled with my first daughter. Like we did it for several months. I wanted to go up to a year at least, but we only made it to 9 months. But I guilted and shamed myself, unfortunately. But my second daughter, I was just like, look, I'm gonna try my best. I'm gonna do
Right.
my
What happens, what
best.
happens.
Right? And then my third daughter, okay, so her name is Neva, and her nickname is Neva the Diva. And she has lived up to that name
Oh
every single day
boy.
of her life. And she wouldn't take a bottle, she wouldn't take a pacifier. So even though I tried to give her everything, she was like, no, strictly breastfed, year and a half. And I was just like, girl, you got to go. But she is still so funny, so sassy. They're so cool. They're all very different. They're all, my children with my husband. And even though they're all the same gender, they all look different. They look related, but like, how some people have like the same baby over and over and over.
Right.
Not my kids. They all like have their own unique look,
Yeah.
personality, preferences. It's a lot of fun.
Aw. So you wear many hats. You're an entrepreneur. I know you're home. You have the girls. So are the girls homeschooled or do they go to school? So how do you kind of navigate motherhood and also taking time for yourself and doing your businesses? And also talk to me a little bit about My Little Napper. That's a children's book too. How'd that come about?
Yes. So they do go to school. We did homeschool at one point, but we decided we are social people, so let's get back out into the world. So they do go to school. My youngest goes to daycare, and last year my husband and I decided through, we can have our entrepreneurial journey, but we also decided to go back to work. So I'm also working full time. Um, but throughout all of this, My Little Napper was a business that came to me like in a dream. It was so funny. My husband, obviously he grew up with the last name Napper, and
Hmm.
he was like, people would make fun of me for having that last name. And I was like, what? And I was like, it's such a cool name. Like, we could do so much with it. Like, let's take our power back with it. And so I came up with My Little Napper. And like I said, it was a children's pajama business. And through that, I decided I wanted to write and illustrate a children's book. And I have it right here. My hair care plan is the book. And I decided to write this book. It was dedicated to my mother, who was a prominent hairstylist in Anchorage. She retired from that career, but I grew up in the hair salon and I always loved it. It was such a great environment, and it was just somewhere where the community came together. You walked in looking one way, you left feeling, liberated and lifted and beautiful.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to celebrate that. And also my daughter, my oldest daughter, she was noticing how different she looked from her peers. And so she was like, well, my hair looks like this and their hair looks like that. And I was like, and that's beautiful. And a theme about me is taking our power back, owning that. And I was like, yes, your hair is different. Let's embrace that. And so throughout the book, I share pictures. Like, this is a picture of my oldest daughter. I
Oh,
have pictures of, you know, my middle daughter, my nieces, our entire family, just showing and
oh.
navigating the different ways we wear our hair, our entire family here. And I just really wanted to embrace that. And so it was a fun journey. I also illustrated it, like I mentioned, and I hadn't illustrated anything beforehand. I was
Wow.
just thank you. I was scouring looking for an illustrator, and I wanted them to get very specific details. When you have
Hmm.
hair like ours, when you use product like ours, it shows up differently. And I really
Yeah.
wanted them to capture that. And after months of looking for a different illustrator, my husband was like, "You do it."
Why don't you
I was
just do
like,
it?
"What?" He was like, you do it. You're talented. You're an artist. You do it. So he bought an iPad. He did an Apple Pen, and every night for months, me and my girls would turn YouTube on the TV, and we would just practice. And they would have their little writing pads and pencils and pens, and they were writing their books, which was super cute. And it was just a family experience that we all like poured love into. And so it's just a fun project and something that I can always look back at and just remember a very special time in our lives.
That is amazing. You illustrated the book. That is wow.
Yeah,
And they're great pictures. That is amazing.
thank
I'd,
you.
I'd, I'd have little stick figures. My daughters are very artistic, so I'd probably have her. She would have to be my illustrator. But that is very neat. I
Thank
know.
you.
I know you're kind of also, like you mentioned, you are an artist, entrepreneur. You're kind of in the influencer world, so to speak, a little bit. I know you like fashion. Talk a little bit about that space of your life as well.
Absolutely. So I have always loved fashion. So back in like 20 November 11th, 2013, I started a fashion blog named the 907 Strut, and I was highlighting fashion in Alaska. From that, I was in fashion shows. I've literally been in Teen Vogue. I have modeled. I've done so many things. In addition to that, back in like 2017, I used to have a Facebook group named Alaskan Fashionistas, and we would post our fashion, what we wore, what we would like to wear, just inspiration. I'm all about community. I have traveled, to New York Fashion Week. I've done a lot of things. I've always, always, always loved fashion. And being a plus size woman, growing up in Alaska, it was very interesting trying to find clothes that were cute that fit me. And so I really leaned into that even more. I had to create my, I had to really lean to it. And it wasn't until about, I was in the seventh grade, my mother and I went to California. And when we went there, that was the first time I saw clothes with gold foil and sequins and, ruffles and layers and
Yeah.
tulle that actually fit me. And I haven't looked back since.
So I know you're big into community. What else do you do for your community, and what do you enjoy about giving back, and why do you think it is so important to show up in that way?
My mother and I did live in the Awake Shelter. They're based in Anchorage, and it was a safe space for women and children that experienced domestic violence. And growing up there, I have to say that even though we experienced hardship, the staff there made me feel so comfortable and so loved, and we had a community. And when I grew up, I knew that I always wanted to give back. So when I launched My Little Napper, I also launched a program where I was donating pajamas to the children that were living in the Awake Shelter. So I have given back by, speaking at their different events, showing my side of being a child in that environment and growing up and still being successful, still being able to give back to the community and continue to grow. So it's been a part of my journey, whether I was the recipient of, donations or, housing or whatever support we could have gotten.
Talk a little bit about for mothers, because when you become a mom, a lot of times, and I love hearing this perspective from different women. Just when they become a mom, they kind of feel like they lose themselves almost. And it is an adjustment period when you have kiddos, but you have three girls, you've completed all these things, and you're still doing things. What would be your advice, and what would you want to say to women or mothers out there who may be experiencing this for the first go around with their kid, or maybe it's their second or third, but still feel like they can't show up authentically as themselves? Maybe they used to love painting and they don't do that anymore. How do you keep your cup full, and what would you say to other women about, making sure that they do? Because, I always say you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right. So again, this kind of goes back to my spiritual journey and grieving. So after I had my first two daughters, I was definitely trying to be my old self, but with kids.
Mm.
And after my third daughter, I completely lost my way. I lost, my love for fashion, for makeup, for showing up in my community. I lost many things. And I feel like once I finally leaned into it, I got to experience the low lows. I was just like, I am going through this, but I continue to go. And that was what is a changing point for me. And this is why I wanted to talk about my journey through grief today, is because we live in a universe of opposites. Opposites is a universal law. So there's up and down, there's left, there's right, there's white and black, right? If you can experience a low, 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 that means that you can experience the high, high, high. And so I feel like if you're going through a season where you're like, this feels very low, I feel very like myself, just know the opposite of does, things will continue to get better. And I feel like it's just practice run. You are a new person. Give yourself grace. Every single time, listen, every single time you have a baby, your DNA changes. So you're a new person. You have to really get to know yourself authentically. And that means listening to yourself. I wasn't really listening to myself, which is why I was ignoring my emotions for so long, ignoring my sadness, because it was like, no, I can't be sad. I need to be happy. But when I finally listened, it's like, no, I need to be sad right now. Then when I needed to be happy, I was able to listen to myself and say, okay, I like this. I like showing up like this. I like being around these people. I like wearing this. I feel energetic when I do this. I lose energy when I'm around these people. I lose energy when I do this. And so I got to really lean into that and fight for my life back. I had to really lean into that. So any advice I would give a new mother is, one, give yourself grace. You are a new person. You're learning to take care of this new being that you created, and you are the ultimate person that is responsible for them. But you also have to take care of yourself because you are a new person. And you, just like a baby, you nurture them, you mother yourself. Check in with yourself. Have you laughed today? Have you had some water? Do you need a nap? Do you need to go play with your friends? Do you need a timeout? All of
Right.
those things that I was doing for
Yeah.
my kids, I eventually started doing for myself. And mothering it's an action word. So you have to do it for yourself just like you're doing it for your kids. And eventually you will find your new self that embraces all parts of you.
And like you mentioned, your girls are seeing you show up that way. And how was that navigating this with your partner when you were kind of going through some of those ups and those downs? Did he have to step up and kind of jump into that role of, being mom and dad while you were kind of figuring out where it was and where you wanted to be emotionally?
Yeah. So my husband, I love him so much. He was always the shoulder to lean on. I say this all the time. He is a confrontational person in a great way. And I was a people pleaser. So when I was, letting people call me, and after I would get off the phone with them, he would notice my energy just be depleted. Or going and doing something that I should have said no to, but I was just trying to be there for everyone else, be everybody else's support. He noticed that. And then eventually he was like, you have to say no the first time. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. Like, you had a new baby. You are experiencing grief. You are a new business owner. You have to give yourself space and the support that you're trying to give to everyone else. Allow people to support you, allow people to help you. And so he really helped coach me through saying the things that I needed, showing up for myself authentically. And I love him for that. He's taught me so much with not only showing up for myself, but defending myself. And I know I say defending myself, it's not in a way of like we were in battle or anything like that. But sometimes I just needed to say, like, I don't want to do it. I don't know why, but I don't want to do it. And that's enough of an explanation.
Oh my goodness.
And
Yeah.
he has really helped me through that.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here, what's next for you on your, what do you have? What do you have going in the future? Is anything down the pipeline?
Absolutely. There's so much going on I'm working on behind the scenes. My book is still available. My hair care plan is available on Amazon right now. I'm relaunching my little napper with more products and more ways to support the community. And then just follow me on TikTok, sharita.mfkn.napper. I share videos of what I'm wearing in the day, sometimes of just me talking. I'm building a community there. And then there's just so much more. So I would say follow me on TikTok. You will see all of the different things that I come out with later on this year. I definitely have some things planned in about 6 months or so. So it's too early to share. But if you
Okay.
follow me, you will definitely see what I'm going to be releasing later this year.
As I wrap this up, I always like to end the podcast with giving my guests the final word, final advice, or if there's anything that I didn't mention or add that you want to share, now would be the time.
Opposites exist. If you can experience a low, 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 know that a high, high, high exists for you. And for those that are religious, if you truly believe that Jesus died for you, just know that he experienced the low, 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 low for us to experience the high, 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 high. So even if you're not going through a depression, just know because he that the high, high, high exists for you. Go and lean into your happiness. Put yourself first. It is actually so important for you to pour into yourself first and let your children see their parents happy, fully happy. And if nobody else is telling you that they support you in this journey, just know that I do. Like I said, I'm available on TikTok. Message me if you ever just need somebody to talk to about it. If you need somebody to encourage you to go and follow your dreams, even as a parent, I will be your biggest cheerleader.
Well, thank you so much for that. And watch, you're going to have like ding, ding, ding. Your DMs are going to be flooded now, but in a good way, in a good way. Well, best of luck to you, Sharita, in all that you're doing. Keep us posted. We'll be looking out to seeing what's coming down the pipeline in 6 months. And thank you so much for being one of our guests here on the Parenting in the Far North podcast.
thank you so much. It was so great talking with you today.
Absolutely. And also, I want to thank everyone for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Sharita, thanks so much.